Season 2 of The Witcher Netflix is less than 3 weeks out now, and I'm making this video just to share with you some of my concerns about this upcoming season because I am very concerned. I'm excited. I'm honestly really excited for this show to come out, but I'm also really concerned. Now, to understand some of these concerns, we might need to go back to season 1 and discuss some of the feelings about that. When season 1 first came out, I was super hyped up. I was super pumped. I love the books. I love the games. The books are my favorite book series. Absolutely love them. I adore them. Read them a few times. Listened to the audiobooks. And as I said, I love the games. And so to have that brought to life as a TV show, I was so excited. I can't put into words how excited I was. And the show came out and I sat down and I binged it all within the first day. And at first, the novelty of seeing these characters on screen, seeing some of these stories, some of these things that I really related to, some of these things that I really had a connection with from reading the books, from playing the game, seeing this stuff come to life on screen, I was so hyped up. I was so excited. I loved my whole experience watching the show until it ended. And when the final episode ended, all I could feel was disappointment. And the main reason I felt disappointment was because, in my opinion, the part of all the book series, the games, the part of it that has always hit me the most, the part I've always felt the strongest emotional sort of connection to, the part that I had the strongest feeling reading, was in the book Sword of Destiny and the chapter Something More, the way the book ends, the way that chapter ends, and it's when Geralt finally finds Ciri. So if you've not read the books, you won't exactly know what happened, but it is a bit similar to the show in the sense that in the end it does, the book ends with the two of them kind of uniting. However, they completely butchered this in the show. Absolutely butchered it. And a big reason for that wasn't just how the scene went down. Like in the books, the way it happens is basically Geralt has saved this guy's life, just much like he does in the show. He saves this guy who's on the road. He gets injured himself. He's on the back of the car. He's being wheeled back to this guy's little village, back to this guy's little house. Anyway, when they get there, it's not run off into the forest and, oh, Ciri finds him in there. It's Geralt literally gets to this house. But along the way there, he's telling the guy, well, I guess, law of surprise type thing. It's like, I guess you give me, when you get home, what you're not expecting, that's what I'll get. And it's basically while that guy has been away, doing his business, whatever, his wife has actually taken in Ciri as sort of a refugee from the war and all the rest of it. She's been out on her own, and his wife has taken Ciri in. And so when they get back, basically, Geralt gets off this car. And Ciri is just standing here with these other kids that the man's wife has. And these kids are all running out to meet their dad. And she sees Geralt. And she goes running over to him. And Geralt runs up and they have a moment where they come together, they embrace. There's no mention of who's Yennefer. That was really silly. But it was this really touching, emotional moment. And now the reason it was so powerful is because of what's actually happened with these characters prior to this. And this is where the show really went wrong. Because the show basically skipped out a huge interaction that happens between Geralt and Ciri in the books. Because earlier on in Sword of Destiny, there is a chapter called Sword of Destiny. And in that chapter, it's in Brokilon Forest, which is where Ciri goes in the show. But in the books, Ciri and Geralt meet in Brokilon Forest. Ciri is like run away from home because she doesn't want to be married to this prince or whatever. And she runs away into the forest. And Geralt just so happens to be going into that forest as well. And he comes across her in the forest. And they have this little bit of a journey into Brokilon Forest where they meet the dryads and all the rest of it. And they have a lot of back and forth and they form quite a strong connection in this forest. And that is a huge part of what makes the payoff at the end of the book when they finally come together and meet. That is one of the parts that like solidifies this bond. Whereas in the show, okay, I still had a little bit of feeling because I kind of related it to the books. And so thinking, okay, the book, now it's here. I'm so excited these characters are going to meet. But looking at the show as a standalone thing, I felt absolutely nothing when these characters came together. Because there was no history. There was no real reason. It's, oh, destiny. Destiny. Law of surprise. Like, it's all these just words almost forced on you and thrown in there without actually having the substance behind them to make them mean anything once they actually come together. And so they completely butchered that part. And so it looks like from the trailers and stuff, it looks like they're trying to maybe redeem that a little bit in season 2. They're trying to, like, for example, they're doing this Grain of Truth story, which is with Nivellen, who's being played by, I forget the actor's name, but he's famous from Game of Thrones, and he's playing Nivellen. Ciri is not normally part of that story, but in season 2, she is going to be part of that story. So it looks like they're trying to put her in elsewhere, trying to form that little bit of a bond. But my concern is, the more I look back at season 1, the more I realize more and more little parts, like that butchering of Brokilon and then Geralt and Ciri meeting. So when I first watched it, I was so excited. And I went, oh, this is amazing. Seeing this all on screen, seeing these characters. But then it gets to a point where, okay, now the novelty's worn off. That the end part, the something more part, that part was a huge disappointment to me, because it was probably my favourite part of all the books. So it was a disappointment. But then I started realising all the rest of it, and just how much the writers just don't seem to have understood the source material for season 1. And I know I hear a lot of people complaining about the timeline of season 1 and how it's all over the place. And I don't think that's a huge deal. I think, okay, there was a little bit confusing, and that's mainly just because the characters don't seem to age at all. Wasn't a big deal. I don't think that is what made the show necessarily good or bad. It was what it was. But my concern is more to do with the writers changing things from the source material in a way that doesn't make it better, right? So it's not just the fact, okay, they added Yennefer's backstory, okay? That was never gone over in the books. The most you get is like Geralt has a hint of a hunchback from whatever. He knew she was once ugly. So there was like a little line that describes, okay, there was a feeling there, and you get like a hint of her backstory. But then the show went on to actually do the backstory, and so I didn't have a problem with that. But when, for example, they start changing things like Ciri and Geralt, how they meet, their backstory, that sort of thing, when they start changing that, when they start changing people such as Fringilla, Cahir, when they start changing these people's personalities. I mean, these people look like completely evil monsters from what was seen in season 1. And now I'm not going to go and spoil the books, but if you have read the books, you know that these characters are not just evil monsters. They're not crazy, devout, religious fanatics or whatever they're trying to do in the show. Like, it's really hard to wrap my head around what are they doing there. It's just like, it's hard to trust that season 2 is going to be all that great when there are so many little bits and pieces that I'm just not sure how they're going to deal with that going forward. I mean, this show's planned for 7 seasons, and that's probably a good amount of seasons to tell the story. But there's some of these things they've set up in the past that I'm not really sure how I can see them recovering, such as Cahir. He looked so irredeemable, so monstrous. And so now it's going to be very, very forced to see how they try and deal with that, going by some of his character arc in the future. Anyway, I am very excited, although hesitant, about season 2, because I do think that, looking at it, I think it does look to be an improvement in quite a few ways. They certainly seem to have done a little bit better with stuff such as armor, because a lot of people had a lot of complaints about, for example, the Nilfgaardian armor in season 1, how it looked like ball sacks. So they do seem to have improved in a few regards, such as that. And a lot of people saying, oh, their special effects look better, oh, it looks like their budget's bigger. I don't think budget was ever really a big issue in season 1. I believe that their budget was like 10 million an episode or something in season 1, which rivaled like later seasons of Game of Thrones. So I don't think budget has ever been actually an issue for them. It's maybe more just how they're then using that budget. But yeah, I'm excited, but I'm also hesitant and concerned. As a standalone TV show, completely separate from the source material, I thought season 1 was enjoyable. I thought it was an enjoyable season of television that if you haven't read the books, I can see people loving it. Okay? But as an adaptation of the source material, as trying to understand the source material, the writers completely failed. The writers failed in almost every way at adapting the source material and at understanding the source material. It's like they dumbed it down, and then they also changed parts for the worst, rather than changing things for the better, or leaving things. It's like they changed a lot of things that didn't need to be changed. They would have just take it, put it on screen. Simple. And that's without me even talking about any casting issues. I'm going to avoid that entirely, but I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions about maybe the wrong person being cast in certain roles. But I'm not even going into that. I actually think that most of the actors did pretty well in their roles. Maybe some of them weren't right for the roles, but I did think that most of the performances were pretty good. For example, Anya Chalotra playing Yennefer. I'm not sure exactly that I thought she looked the part, but I would say her performance, I thought that the material she had to work with, I think she was good in her role. I think she was good at what she had to work with. And I would say the same about most of the actors and the characters in the show. But yeah, as a standalone thing, I think it's enjoyable, it's worth watching. But as an adaptation of the source material, which is what this is, it's supposed to be based on the books, it fails. It fails in most ways, almost every way it fails. And so I'm very curious, very excited to watch season 2 because I think it's going to make or break the entire series. It looks as though they're trying to cater more towards the game fans coming this season, with more monsters. There was one trailer where Geralt's got like a fiery sword. It's like it's got runes or something on it. So it looks certainly like they're trying to cater more to those people. Whereas in season 1 they had actually said, we are not adapting the games, we're adapting the books. Don't expect to see things from the games, expect the books. And so I think that's why they've also had a lot of backlash from people, maybe such as myself, the book lovers, the book fans, because they've been told, we are adapting these books, we're trying to be faithful to the books, not the games. And then we come in and we see, well, actually, you've butchered this, you've not understood this, and you've changed that. And so I think that's why there's been a lot of backlash for season 1 from book fans. But then, in comparison, game fans, they don't really have this same stuff because The Witcher 3 is kind of like fan fiction set in the future after the books. So they don't really have this same issue to try and get across. The most I ever saw game fans complaining about was, where are all the monsters? Or why does Triss look like that? And as far as the monsters, I always think it's quite amusing because people who have played the games don't actually realise the books barely have any monsters in them. The first couple have quite a few because they're a collection of short stories, but there's 8 books, sorry. And out of the 8 books, there are not that many monsters featured. The books are not about monsters at all. In fact, in the books, it's stated very clearly that the Witcher profession is dying off because there are not very many monsters left because they've all been killed. And so I think a lot of people who are coming in from the games or who haven't read the books don't actually quite understand the true premise of this series. I don't think a lot of people realise as well that in the books, Ciri is arguably the main character as opposed to Geralt. At the very least, they're probably like joint main characters. It's a bit strange to see then the showrunners trying to force Yennefer into being, oh well, she is an equal main character, when I don't think that's true at all. I mean, there's one book in the series where she basically doesn't appear for the whole book, and there are many other books where she doesn't really have much of a part to play either, and that's obviously where now the writers are writing in more Yennefer backstory, they're writing in more things for Yennefer to do, and that is maybe where some of the concerning parts and concerning changes are going to come from Season 2, as maybe some of them were also in Season 1. Because they're trying to force almost Yennefer to be an equal part of this 3, when in the books really she isn't an equal part. She is a big part, but she's not quite an equal part of the story in comparison to Geralt and Ciri. And when the writers are forcing that in, that can sometimes make some issues, because it means, okay, now the plot has to change a little bit. Now you have to move things around here. But yeah, so as I was saying, game fans, they don't really have the same issues. They've got a couple of maybe gripes because, oh, I want to see more monsters, more action. I want Triss to look more like she did in the games, that type of thing. But they don't really have much of a story, because they don't know the background story. They don't have that to compare, so they don't have that to critique. But it does seem that Season 2 is starting to throw in more of these little Easter eggs, more of these little references to the games to try and bring those people in. And I feel like maybe that's partly because they realise that they've lost the book fans. They've lost so many of them already. Like, if you go on certain subreddits, you go on certain Discord servers and whatever, you will find there are a lot of people very, very upset with how Season 1 turned out. I mean, as I say, I think it was a failure in terms of being an adaptation of the source material, but I also think that it was still worth watching. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was a decent season of TV, just as long as you separate those two things. But people really struggle to separate those things, and so you end up with a lot of people who just cannot forgive the fact that something they love has essentially been butchered and changed unnecessarily and turned into something else. I'm going to wrap this up now, but I'm looking forward to season 2 just to see how different it is, how much they nod to the games. As I said, I did enjoy season 1 despite it not really being a good adaptation of the books. And so I'm looking forward to it. But I'm also really worried about it at the same time. Anyway, if you have any questions about anything, you want me to clear up any misconceptions you have if you've not read the books or anything like that, or if you just have anything you want to say about this subject, let me know what your thoughts are about season 2 of the show. About what were your thoughts about season 1? Are you excited for season 2? Will you even be watching season 2? Let me know all that good stuff in those comments down below. I've posted like 2 videos on this channel in the last like 2 years. My first video was actually about the first Witcher season before it actually even came out. I do intend on starting to post on this channel a little bit more. I would like to talk a little bit. Maybe once the show comes out, I might do some little breakdowns of, oh, this episode, that episode, something that happened there. I might start doing more Witcher stuff. I'm going to do maybe some other shows, maybe gaming stuff as well. So, yeah, if you're interested in any of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll be posting more content soon.